Hello, welcome to Ludlow Library Story Time, and today I'm going to read you some extracts from Alice in Wonderland, and we have a brilliant beyond the page illustration from the Helen Oxenbury book and that Sally has continued for us of the croquet match. So I'm going to read you an extract about the croquet match today. First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the 3 gardeners, oblong and flat, with their hands and feet at the corners. Next, the 10 courtiers. These were decorated all over with diamonds, and they walked 2 and 2, as the soldiers did. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them, and the little dears came jumping merrily along hand in couples, and they were all decorated with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognised the White Rabbit. It was talking in a hurried, nervous manner, smiling at everything that was said, and went by without noticing her. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion. And last of all, in this grand procession, came the King and Queen of Hearts. Alice was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face, like the other 3 gardeners. But she could not remember having heard such a rule at processions. And besides, what would be the use of a procession, she thought, if people all had to lie down upon their faces so they couldn't see? So she stood still where she was and waited. When the procession came to opposite Alice, they all stopped and looked at her, and the Queen said severely, "Who is this?" she said to the Knave of Hearts, who only bowed and smiled in reply. "Idiot," said the Queen, tossing her head impatiently, and turning to Alice, she went on, "What's your name, child?" "My name is Alice, so please your Majesty," said Alice, very politely. But she added to herself, "Why, they're only a pack of cards. I needn't be afraid of them." "And who are these?" said the Queen, pointing to the 3 gardeners who were lying around the rose tree. For you see, as they were lying on their faces, the pattern on their back was the same as the rest of the pack. She could not tell whether they were gardeners or soldiers or courtiers or 3 of her own children. "How should I know?" said Alice, surprised at her own courage. "It's no business of mine." The Queen turned crimson with fury and, after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, screamed, "Off with her head, off!" "Nonsense," said Alice very loudly and decidedly, and the Queen was silent. The King laid his hand upon her arm and timidly said, "Oh, consider, my dear, she is only a child." The Queen turned angrily away from him and said to the Knave, "Turn them over." The Knave did so, very carefully with one foot. "Get up," said the Queen in a shrill, loud voice, and the 3 gardeners instantly jumped up and began bowing to the King, the Queen, the royal children, and everybody else. "Leave off that," screamed the Queen. "You make me giddy." And then turning to the rose tree, she went on, "What have you been doing here?" "May it please your Majesty," said 2 in a very humble tone, going down on one knee, "we were trying—" "I see," said the Queen, who had meanwhile been examining the roses. "Off with their heads!" And the procession moved on, 3 of the soldiers remaining behind to execute the unfortunate gardeners who ran to Alice for protection. "You shan't be beheaded," said Alice, and she put them into a large flower pot that stood near. The 3 soldiers wandered about for a minute or 2 looking for them, and then quietly marched off after the others. "Are their heads off?" shouted the Queen. "Their heads are gone, if you please your Majesty," the soldiers shouted in reply. "That's right," shouted the Queen. "Can you play croquet?" The soldiers were silent and looked at Alice, as the question was evidently meant for her. "Yes," shouted Alice. "Come on then," roared the Queen, and Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next.